I want to explain what this workshop actually was before I get into what happened, because I think without understanding how much that space meant to me personally, the scale of what Rosalind did will not land the way it should. I have been restoring vintage motorcycles as a serious hobby for almost 15 years, and about 6 years ago, I built a proper detached workshop on my property specifically for that purpose, insulated, climate-controlled to a degree, wired for the specialized equipment the work requires, and secured with a commercial-grade rolling door along with a separate side entrance. It is not a garage in any casual sense. It houses tools worth more than most people's cars, several motorcycles in various stages of restoration at any given time, and at the point this incident happened, a 1967 Triumph Bonneville I had been working on for the better part of a year that was maybe 6 weeks from completion. I live in a community called Thornfield Glen, a fairly upscale development of about 70 homes, larger lots than most HOA communities, which is part of why I had the space to build a proper workshop in the first place. I had been a resident there for 9 years by the time this happened, generally on good terms with the association, current on dues, no history of violations, and largely uninvolved in HOA politics beyond occasionally reading the newsletter. Rosalind Thackeray had been board president for about 2 years. I did not know her particularly well personally, though I had certainly heard her name mentioned around the neighborhood, generally in the context of stories that made me glad I had never had reason to interact with her directly. From what other residents described, she carried herself with a certain performative wealth, the kind of person who mentioned property values and, quote, community standards frequently enough that it started to feel less like genuine concern for the neighborhood and more like a way of establishing status over everyone around her. The Tuesday this happened started completely ordinarily. I had spent the morning working on the Bonneville, left my rolling door open for ventilation while I ran to the hardware store for a specific gasket I needed, a trip that took maybe 40 minutes round trip. I did not think anything of leaving the door open briefly, since Thornfield Glen is a genuinely low-crime area, and I have done exactly that hundreds of times over the years without incident. When I pulled back into my driveway, I noticed immediately that something was different, because my workshop's rolling door, which I distinctly remembered leaving fully raised, was now lowered about 3/4 of the way, just enough clearance for someone to duck under, but clearly deliberately positioned to obscure what was inside from casual view from the street. I raised the door fully and stood there for what felt like a genuinely long moment trying to process what I was looking at, because parked directly in the center of my workshop, straddling the space where the Bonneville's lift stand normally sat, which I had moved earlier that morning and left leaning against the side wall, was a pristine, obviously brand new Range Rover, dark green, the kind of vehicle that costs more than some houses in less expensive parts of the country. On my workbench, weighted down by one of my own torque wrenches, was a note handwritten on stationery that had Rosalind's name embossed at the top, which told me immediately whose vehicle I was looking at even before I finished reading it. The note explained, in a tone I can only describe as breezy, almost cheerful, that her driveway was being resealed that day and the contractor had suggested keeping her vehicle off the fresh sealant for at least 24 hours, that she had noticed my garage door open and thought, and I am going to quote this as closely as I can recall since I photographed the note before anything else happened, that a space this well built was clearly meant for protecting valuable things, and she was sure I would not mind providing temporary secure storage as a fellow community member who understood these things. I want to describe my internal reaction honestly, because it moved through several distinct stages very quickly. The first was simple disbelief, the kind where you reread something twice because your brain refuses to process that a stranger, someone I had exchanged maybe a total of 3 sentences with over 9 years, had let herself into my private workshop, moved my equipment, and left her vehicle there without ever once asking me directly. The second stage was anger, sharp and immediate, when I realized she had moved my lift stand, an expensive, carefully positioned piece of equipment currently supporting part of an in-progress restoration project, apparently just shoving it against the wall to make room for her SUV without any apparent concern for whether that would damage the stand, damage the motorcycle parts sitting nearby, or disrupt work I had been carefully doing for months. The third stage, and this is the one that ended up mattering most for everything that happened afterward, was something closer to cold, deliberate calculation, because underneath the anger, a specific thought had crystallized with total clarity. I already had a flight booked. I already had a 2-week trip to Maui planned and paid for, departing the very next morning, a trip I had booked back in the spring to celebrate a milestone birthday with my partner, Yolanda, something we had been looking forward to for months. I did not call Rosalind. I did not text her. I did not leave a note back explaining that this was completely unacceptable and she needed to move her vehicle immediately. I made a decision, standing right there in my workshop doorway, that I have thought about many times since, and that I do not regret for a single second. I photographed everything first, extensively: the note, the position of the vehicle, the moved lift stand, the general state of the space exactly as I found it, time-stamped on my phone, because I understood immediately that documentation was going to matter enormously no matter what happened next. Then I walked over to my workshop's control panel and lowered the rolling door completely, engaged the manual deadbolt override that supplements the electric motor specifically for situations like extended absences, locked the side entrance door as well, and activated the security system I had installed 2 years earlier after a string of tool thefts hit a neighboring community, a system that included motion sensors, a loud audible alarm, and continuous camera recording with cloud backup. Rosalind Thackeray's Range Rover was now sealed inside a locked, alarmed, camera-monitored workshop, with no way for her to retrieve it without either contacting me directly or, presumably, attempting some kind of forced entry that would immediately trigger both the alarm and full video documentation of whatever she chose to do about it. I did not sleep particularly well that night, not out of guilt, I want to be clear, but out of a kind of nervous anticipation about what the following morning would bring once she presumably discovered what I had done. I left for the airport at 6 the next morning with Yolanda, who I had explained the entire situation to the previous evening and who, after her initial shock, found the whole thing almost as absurd and infuriating as I did. I turned my phone to airplane mode somewhere over the Pacific about 4 hours into the flight, deliberately, and did not turn it back on until we landed in Maui roughly 9 hours after departure. When I did turn it back on, sitting in a rental car outside the airport with Yolanda already texting her sister excited photos of the ocean, I watched 41 notifications load in rapid succession: missed calls, voicemails, and text messages, the overwhelming majority of them from a number I did not immediately recognize, but would soon learn belonged to Rosalind Thackeray herself. I want to describe the general tone of that message trail, because it evolved dramatically over the course of that single day back home while I had been in the air completely unreachable. The earliest messages, time-stamped for what would have been mid-morning back home, were mildly irritated, asking me to please move my car, referring to it as though I had somehow inconvenienced her, an inversion of reality so complete it was almost impressive. By early afternoon back home, the tone had shifted noticeably, messages now explicitly demanding I return home immediately to move, quote, her vehicle, and mentioning, with what read as genuine indignation, that she had an event to attend that evening and absolutely needed the Range Rover. By evening, the final several messages had abandoned any pretense of polite request entirely, threatening HOA violations against me for what she called unreasonable and hostile behavior. And in the very last voicemail, I listened to standing in that Maui airport parking lot, threatening to call the police to report her vehicle as, and this is a direct quote I saved, because I genuinely could not believe she said it, stolen. I sat in that rental car for a long moment after listening to that final voicemail, and then I did something that I think surprised even Yolanda, who was watching my expression change throughout. I laughed. Genuinely for probably a full minute, because the idea that Rosalind Thackeray intended to call the police and report her own vehicle stolen, when that vehicle was sitting exactly where she had voluntarily and without permission driven it, inside a private workshop she had entered without any authorization whatsoever struck me as one of the most audacious things I had ever heard. I called my attorney that same evening from the hotel, not out of panic, but out of careful precaution, because I wanted to understand my legal position clearly before responding to any of Rosalind's messages, and because I genuinely was curious whether her threatened police report would go anywhere or simply collapse the moment an officer understood the actual sequence of events. My attorney, once I walked her through the full timeline, the photographs, the note, the timestamps, told me something that settled any remaining uncertainty I had about whether I was overreacting. She confirmed that Rosalind had, in plain terms, committed trespass by entering my private workshop without permission, and had potentially committed a form of civil conversion or, at minimum, created a bailment situation entirely of her own making by leaving her vehicle there uninvited, and that critically, I had no legal obligation whatsoever to return home early, disrupt my own vacation, or take any action at all to accommodate a situation she alone had created through her own unauthorized actions. If anything, my attorney pointed out, the security footage and photographs I already had were going to make an exceptionally clean case if Rosalind followed through on her threat to involve police, because any reasonable review of that footage would immediately show her vehicle already parked inside a workshop she had entered on her own, well before I ever locked anything. I sent Rosalind exactly one message that entire 2-week trip, the following morning, after a full night's sleep and a long conversation with my attorney about precisely how to word it. I told her that I had never given her permission to enter my private workshop, move my equipment, or leave her vehicle there, that I was currently out of the country on a vacation planned months in advance, that her vehicle was secure and undamaged inside a locked, alarmed, and continuously monitored space, and that I would be happy to discuss arrangements for its retrieval upon my return in 2 weeks. I'm going to stop the story here. At the moment I hit send on that message and turned my phone back to airplane mode for the rest of that first evening in Maui, because everything that happened over the following 2 weeks, what Rosalind actually did once she realized threatening me was accomplishing nothing. The involvement of an actual police officer who came to assess her stolen vehicle claim in person. And what that officer discovered once he reviewed my security footage and understood exactly how her vehicle had ended up inside my workshop in the first place, changed this from a bizarre parking dispute into something that would end Rosalind Thackeray's HOA presidency the moment I finally landed back home. Part 2 picks up with what happened during those 2 weeks back in Thornfield Glen, while I was on a beach in Maui completely unreachable. The police visit Rosalind's own stolen vehicle report triggered, and the moment I finally walked back into that workshop and gave her exactly 1 hour to get her SUV off my property for good. Thumbnail text. Her car stayed locked up for 2 weeks.